All right, you guys, so today we are reviewing the Slimeball 95A Vomits. So let's get right into the specs. These wheels have a 60 millimeter diameter, a 95A durometer, 45 millimeter width, 28 millimeter contact patch. They weigh 434 grams. At first glance, these wheels look kind of like they're center set and symmetrical, but in fact they are slightly offset per the manufacturer, and they are a little bit asymmetrical. They have a mildly conical inner side and a more radial outside, and we'll talk about what that means here in a little bit. For color options, there's usually a handful of cool retro looking options. So the ones I'm writing on the website are called the Snake Vomits, but they have the Goober Vomits and the Panther Vomits and other ones. It's all the same wheel as long as you're picking the 60 millimeter 95A. These wheels are priced at $39.95. So when I first took these wheels out, the first thing that stood out to me is that they feel way harder than I expected. Considering the Pal Dragon 60x42 is a 93A durometer and the Spitfire Radial Full that I reviewed is a 97A, I expected this Slimeball 95A Vomit to feel somewhere in between in terms of hardness. But even as a 95A durometer, trust me, this wheel feels way harder than the Spitfire 97A. I feel every bump and crack a lot more than I do the 97A Spitfires, and also impact from flyouts and ollie-based maneuvers feel way more harsh on those landings. Those 97A Spitfires absorb impact better than these 95A Slimeballs. So how do these wheels roll? I'm gonna be honest, I thought these wheels were gonna be all hype, and I did not expect these wheels to impress me at all. I took these to the brand new Smooth skate park in town, and I thought the roll quality was outstanding. They were very fast, carried momentum really well, and they accelerated really well. I even took my 60 millimeter Spitfires out and I did side-by-side comparisons where I took the bearings out of the Slimeballs and put them into the Spitfires onto the same board and trucks. And I thought these two sets of wheels were very comparable in terms of speed, acceleration, and momentum. I also thought the ride feel in terms of quality on smooth surfaces was comparable. They feel different, but it's comparable in terms of quality. Rougher surfaces are a different story. At my local HOA skate park, which is mildly rough with some potholes, these wheels were losing speed really bad compared to the Spitfires. On these Slimeballs, I feel all the gritty texture of the concrete, and there were a lot of vibrations which not only slowed me down, they also made the ride feel more uncomfortable. The Dragons and Spitfires just do a fantastic job at smoothing out all those little bumps and vibrations, which make the ride faster, smoother, and more comfortable compared to these 95A Slimeballs. So with that, I would recommend these Slimeball 60mm 95A wheels for very smooth concrete skate park surfaces only, and I would definitely stay away from asphalt. So how do these pump? So when these wheels were brand new, they felt surprisingly tacky to the touch. And so with that, they initially gripped super well for pumping on flat ground. But after just a couple sessions, that super tacky outerlay wore off and they don't grip quite as well as they did before, but they still grip and pump decently well. To me, they grip about the same as those 60mm 97A Spitfires. But like the Spitfires and the Pal Dragons, these Slimeballs will accidentally slide out if you pump too aggressively. So how do these wheels slide? I did some sliding on this Smooth skate park bank, and I gotta say I had a ton of fun with it. So the slide on the Dragons and the Spitfires feels so smooth. But on these Slimeballs, it's not a smooth feeling slide initiation. It feels pretty abrupt, almost like you've got to apply a little effort to pop those back wheels loose and then they slide. And during the entire slide, these wheels vibrate and you can really feel those vibrations all the way through the slide. Honestly, I had a lot of fun with that sensation. Something about all that vibrating and that popping slide initiation just made these slides feel more alive. The slide is also very loud. It's the loudest slide of any wheel I've tried so far. But because of this slide, which is not smooth compared to the Spitfires and Dragons, I took a slam on this no-stall revert. I've never slammed on this trick, but as my surf skate was vibrating through the revert, my heel was sliding off the back and I jackknifed and went down. So anyway, I think this wheel can make certain tricks like these reverts harder, but for sliding like this on smooth banks, it's a ton of fun. Alright, so let's touch on this wheel's asymmetrical offset shape. At first glance, it almost looks symmetrical in center set, but it isn't. The outside of the wheel, which is the side with the graphic, has a more pronounced rounded radial shape, and the inside has more of a lower angle conical shape. This wheel is going to be best ridden with the graphic on the outside for two reasons. One, that radial outside is going to make for easier slide initiation, and it will make for getting into slappy grinds and wall rides easier if you're doing those sorts of tricks. Two, that super cool retro slime ball graphic that's only printed on the outside, you're going to want to show that off because it is a cool looking retro wheel. If you were to flip the graphic from the outside to the inside, you're going to change the way the wheel feels and functions because it is offset, so you're going to be moving that bearing seat more to the inside, and slide initiation and grind tricks and slappies and things like that are all going to feel different and not quite right if you put that graphic on the inside. Because wheels like the Spitfire Radial Full are totally symmetrical and center set, you can ride these either way. Personally, I didn't like the graphic on the Spitfire as much as the solid red, so I initially set these up with the graphic on the inside from the very beginning. One thing about this wheel that I'm not too fond of are the dimensions. This wheel is unnecessarily wide. So again, it has a 28mm contact patch and it's 45mm wide. Looking at the Spitfire, it's got a slightly wider contact patch at 29mm, and yet the wheel is slimmer than the slime ball at 42mm. That extra width makes the wheel relatively heavy at 434 grams, and it just feels bulky to me. I would like this wheel a little bit more if it was a little lighter and slimmer and a little softer. I don't do slappy grinds, but I can imagine that this big rounded outer edge could make slappy grinds easier and more fun though. It's not my favorite wheel for grind tricks, and I personally prefer the Spitfires because it's just what I enjoy whenever it comes to the grind feel. But that is just going to be personal preference. Alright, so what makes this wheel special? What I honestly think makes this wheel stand out the most is the aesthetic. Slimeball makes very cool, old school, retro looking wheels that you could put on to complement a surf skate deck that has these poppy 80s colors to them and stuff. I've known people to seek out Slimeball wheels so that they can customize their setup to have it look a certain way, and if these slime balls fit the profile of a board you're building, they're going to make it look really good. Personally, I'm not too crazy about these retro colors. And just an FYI, these wheels started with this really glossy kind of white swirl in them and stuff, and that all kind of quickly fades after just a session or two. But it still maintains that 80s aesthetic that's super retro. And again, in addition to the aesthetic, they have that super unique slide that I've never experienced before. That hard wheels, super vibrating slide that felt super alive. I've never felt that before. Had that poppy break-in traction and it was really loud. And that was a fun experience for a change, and I can see how people would appreciate that. But in my opinion, if you're riding even just mildly rough surfaces, you're going to notice that you're going slower than wheels that smooth out that texture. And lastly, these are also some of the lowest priced wheels that are good for surf skate park riding. They're only $39.95. So if these old school retro looking slime balls are a wheel that appeals to you, then by all means go and pick up a set because they're only $39.95. And I will see you in the next review video. Take care.